Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Easy Conversations podcast, a podcast about having easy conversations. I'm your host, Furkan Dandia. In this week's episode, I'm excited to welcome Jose Alejandro. Jose is a men's life and leadership coach, impact-driven marketing strategist, somatic practitioner, menswork facilitator, and apprentice rite of passage guide. He is the founder of Intentional Impact, a program focused on helping driven men increase impact and income with intention and integrity. He is also the co-founder of Modern Renaissance Man, a movement empowering modern men to create the life they love. Through brotherhood, leadership training, transformative experiences, and resources, they inspire men to unapologetically express their truth and own their power with an open heart. He bridges his personal life experiences and hero's journey with his training and somatic experiencing, trauma-informed coaching, men's work, breathwork, ancestral wisdom, and rites of passage to inspire leaders to own their stories, release limiting beliefs, and embody their truth. In this episode, Jose shares his story from his childhood and experiencing his parents' divorce. We then discuss Jose's hero's journey leading him back to his family's heritage in Puerto Rico. Jose then shares his leadership style, why he wants other men to lead with impact, intention, and integrity, and what those words mean to him. I really hope you get a lot out of this episode, and please find Jose on Instagram at rjose_Alejandro. If you could leave a 5-star review at the end of the episode, I would truly appreciate it. Right, Jose, welcome to the Easy Conversations podcast. Thank you for coming on here and having this conversation with me. I'm super excited. I've had the opportunity to firsthand see some of the work you're doing, but I'm hoping you can share that with the listeners today. And so before we get started, I want to give you an opportunity here to introduce yourself and maybe tell the listeners what it is that you do.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, really grateful to be here. It's been great to connect with you over the past year. And what do I do? Well, I'm a men's life coach and leadership guide. That's like the easiest way that I can explain it. And a lot of my work is obviously focused on supporting men and empowering men and embodying their truth and living their vision. And I've found throughout my journey and in my journey with working with men that in order to do so, in order to fully express our truth, to own our truth, to embody our truth, uh, there's a lot of inner work that's required, and not just mental inner work, but also embodiment work and somatic experiencing and all the things that come with releasing old limiting beliefs and patterns that go way beyond the mind but into the body. So a lot of my work is focused around that, and that is deeply reflected in the lives and the leadership and the work that men do. Now, how do I do that? With a little more context, I'm a men's rite of passage guide. So I take men out on wilderness rites of passages and support them in transitioning from one stage of their life to the next. It doesn't have to be from boy to man, but a lot of men haven't experienced an initiation or that sort of transition in an intentional setting. So that's something that I do in my work. Like I said, the coaching, and then also through my organization, Modern Renaissance Man. So Modern Renaissance Man is, we like to call it a brand because we realized there was a gap in the space where you were either an organization doing cathartic releases in a dungeon, or you were doing more of the like surface level like mastermind or community stuff. So we kind of created a bridge where we do retreats, we do experiences, we have an online brotherhood, and really just allow men the space to connect and to experience coaching and all the things that I mentioned initially without feeling like they have to, pay $20,000 for a coach in order to go through that journey.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And thank you for sharing all that. Was there any point in your life that you had to go through that journey yourself? Because quite often, what I see is we end up doing it ourselves, and then we're like, oh, this is amazing. I want to share it with other people. Was that
Yeah.
something you came across yourself?
Absolutely. I mean, that was my catalyst. It's definitely a pain to purpose story. Um, I'll start off by saying that 12 years ago I got my bachelor's in psychology, but it wasn't until 5 years after that where I actually worked with a therapist. Right, the irony there. I understood everything conceptually. I was obsessed with psychology. I mean, I just really immersed myself and understood everything related to childhood developmental stages, to attachment styles, to just all of it. But 5 years after that, I moved out of my house. My parents got divorced literally or separated 4 months after I moved out. My relationship was going through a really rough time, rough patch. I was not fulfilled in my corporate job,
Mhm.
and I was overstayed. So I had intentions on being an entrepreneur, and I just was afraid of making the leap and didn't know what the next step was and didn't trust myself. And all of this happened all at once. I think definitely moving out of my house and seeing my parents divorce after moving out kind of brought up that 5-year-old when they divorced the first time. That part of me that felt responsible, that part of me that felt like um, it was my fault that they stayed together, my fault that they separated, and all of that started showing up everywhere. And it wasn't like the other areas of my life found it's like it wasn't like it catalyzed new problems in other areas of my life.
Mhm.
It just revealed the stuff that was already there, and that was my catalyst. It was, what do I do? I mean, I understand all these things, but I can't seem to show up, and they don't seem to be reflecting in my conversations, in my conflict, in the way that I feel. I was
Right.
like, okay, let me go see a therapist. And I mean, long story short, we'll dive deeper into whatever aligns. But went to a therapist. The therapist definitely supported me over the course of probably like a year to dive deep and understand like all of those stories and just have a safe space to share it all and
Mhm.
hear my own. It was almost like hearing myself talk about these things and get those like aha moments of like, oh shit, wow.
Yeah.
And that was powerful.
Mhm.
That took me into men's groups.
Mhm.
So I would listen to a podcast where a co-founder of a men's organization has said, you know, uh, men's groups are an essential piece to any man's journey through life. And I was like, what? First thing I thought of was, Fight Club, where he just kept hopping from AA meeting to AA meeting. And I'm just like, okay, I guess that's what it is. You sit in a circle and you just
Yeah.
like share your problems. But when I went to one, it was like, it didn't go as deep as therapy, but there was something so therapeutic about it
Mhm.
that hearing other men share what they were going through, hearing other men share that they had gotten past it, and then
Mhm.
being able to share how I felt and what I was going through, and feel someone genuinely empathize with me, not in a clinical way, but like bro, I've been there. Like, or shit, I'm there. Like, looks a little different, but I'm there.
Mhm.
That just took me down the rabbit hole, right? And that led me to apprenticeships. That led me to looking for other men's groups, and that led me to realizing like psychology and my interest in that when I was in college was just an expression of like my interest in healing myself and healing others. So it completely started with me needing it and
Yeah.
wanting it and craving it, and then this desire, this burning desire to share with the world, because like
Mhm.
if this helped me, how many other men could this support? So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And men's group have definitely come up a lot in this podcast too. I'm part of a couple myself, and it's powerful stuff. To your point, there's an aspect of brotherhood that we don't necessarily get in our day-to-day lives. So to have that opportunity of going in unconditionally, feeling seen, heard, and valued, it's so important to build that connection. And one of the things you mentioned along those lines was the rite of passage. Why is that so important for men? And if you could
Yeah.
share that a little bit.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, um, I'll start off by saying that some of the best movies, uh, and by best I mean, the numbers speak for themselves, but I think the ones that are classics that people always refer back to, for myself, like there's movies like Lion King that I'll watch again now that I'm 30 years old, and it was my favorite movie when I was 3. And every time I see it, there's a new message in it that just awakens something in me. Movies like a little more grown movies like a Gladiator, right? One I watched when I was a teenager and was like, whoa. And then now I watch it, there's elements of principle, of values, of integrity that just like really evoke something out of me that I didn't understand when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It was like, okay, with Lion King, for example, his father gets killed. He carries the shame, believing that he's the one that's responsible for it. He
Yeah.
goes into the darkness. He loses himself or denies his role as a king, right? To the point where he forgets that he's meant to take that role, and then he goes through this dark night of the soul, this awakening, but he's not king yet. He's got to come back and reclaim the throne from a
Yeah.
place of service. I mean, he could do the same thing as Scar and say, I want to be king for my own selfish reasons. But instead, he does it because there's a bigger purpose. And everyone's kind of reflecting back to him like, you know, the jungle depends on you. And he's got to fight Scar in order to claim that throne. That I literally watched them. I used to have the VHS and then the rewinder next to it, uh, and I literally probably had like five because every time I rewinded them so much that the tape would come out, and that part of me, there was a part of me that was evoked, like that was just like resonated with that, like, oh man, like so cool. And I think all of us have that within us. All of us want to see what we're made of. All of us want to experience that threshold, but not all of us are willing to do so, right? We often watch movies, we watch sports. I mean, if you think of football,
Yeah.
right, the whole concept is to break through, right? You're
Mhm.
breaking through into across the threshold. Once you cross the line, there's like this enthusiasm that everyone reflects or projects onto the person who actually did it. Rites of passages, you know, are really a part of all of our lives. I mean, when we lose our virginities, that's a rite of passage. When we experience heartbreak, when we have our first have our first girlfriend, or when we graduate high school, when we graduate college. These are all rites of passages.
Mm.
But when you think about rites of passages in our culture, like all of our ancestors, we all experienced, they all had some sort of nature-based rite of passage.
Yeah.
And the focus of this was to create a healthy transition from boyhood into manhood. And when I say boyhood, oftentimes we think, I know I've thought, boyhood is a human being that looks like a child, right? But the lack of rites of passages have actually created a almost like a blockage in
Mhm.
adolescence where we have boys in men's bodies,
Yeah.
and they're acting from this place, the selfishness. I mean, now if you look at the layers, Scar, why did he have this like jealousy over his brother being king? Well, probably started when he was a kid,
Yeah.
right? His cousin was getting all the light. He was destined to be king. Things that I'm sure whoever wrote it thought about, but really it's a break in the psyche from that boyhood, like, oh, this happened to me, or this is for me, to I'm responsible, whatever role it is that I'm meant to play. Maybe
Right.
it's not king. I'm responsible for stepping into that fully, unapologetically, with all my power, all my truth, and from a place of service rather than self-serving.
Mm-hmm.
So rite of passage in the context of men's work and the wilderness journeys that I work in, are really focused on creating intentional settings for that transition.
Yeah.
Because a rite of passage, like a fraternity hazing, for example, there is an element of rite of passage there, but they're uninitiated men, initiated men. So
Yeah.
there is a lack of intention. There's a lack of integration. There's a lack of understanding who we truly are before the process even starts. One thing we like to say is a 4 day fast in the desert is a 4 day fast in the desert unless you give it meaning,
Mm.
right? So the whole point is to bring meaning back and bring some of those ancestral elements so that men can transition in an intentional way without with the context of where we are in today's day and age. I mean, there's a lot of rites of passages that created maybe more harm than good, right? But the
Yeah.
intention was there, that aren't relevant today. So
Mhm.
it's more about just creating a space and a container to induce a little bit of trauma with some intention, so that you can find out what we're made of. Conditions for clarity is really the element, knowing what you're made of. Those two things, I would say, are the core piece of a rite of passage.
Yeah, yeah, no, thank you for sharing that, and so much you covered there, and I appreciate the using that Lion King analogy because there's a lot of mythologies where there is that idea of rites of passage, whether you kind of look at some of the ancient stories too that have been handed down or passed down to us. There's always that element of taking ownership and stepping into your role. But the other thing you touched on is not everyone's meant to be king, and we need to be open and accepting of that. And I think that's part of the problem in the society today, where you've got men looking at other men at the top, and they're like, "I want to be that," and if I don't get that, that's failure. And then they kind of fall into this depressive cycle, and it's very unfortunate because we all have a gift that we can embody and share with this world, and we just need to step into that. and
Yes.
and then as far as you touched on the whole aspect of intention, impact, integrity, one of the recent things you did that I was grateful to be a part of was that 1 week challenge. Do you want to touch on that? Like, why are those three eyes so important for you, and
Yeah.
why is that something that you want to embody in the men you work with?
Yeah. Well, thank you for asking that, and honoring you for joining that challenge. It was really great to have you in there. Before I answer that question, you brought up something really beautiful. The not everyone gets to be king. I think what rite of passages have taught me, just for my own journey, is that I get to be king of my own life.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the
Yeah.
core of rites of passages. It's like, where are you not being king of your own life because you're so focused on being king of others
Mm-hmm.
for ego driven reasons, right? Like you just said, the man at the top, I want to be that guy because he gets all the glory, he has all the power, he has all the women, he has all the money. And that completely draws us away from the opportunity to be a king in our own lives. So
Yeah.
just want to add that piece, because we all get to be kings, but like you said, society makes us believe that king is this person that holds all the power, and everyone's always fighting for that. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, thank you for adding to that because I agree with you. We can all be leaders in our lives, in our communities. There's so much we can do, even in like our family units, and our neighborhoods. There's opportunity everywhere to lead.
right,
Yeah, you're
right.
right.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, intention, impact, and integrity. I think with that being said, it's perfect transition, and I think I'm assuming, and maybe even subconsciously, that's why you brought it up, right? There's an element of, we all make an impact in our lives, and in others.
Hmm.
AKA, we are all leaders. AKA, we are all kings. I think, um, for me, throughout my journey, I I had trouble owning that I was a leader in the spaces I was already in, because again, I was paying attention to being a leader according to what I thought the ultimate leader was, right? Whether
Mhm.
that's corner office, higher salary, the right car, all these different things. I got caught up in that, and I wasn't paying attention to how I was making an impact on my parents,
Mm.
on my partner, on, you know, for example, when I first started my men's group in my living room, there was 5 men there, and there were moments where I got so caught up in like the vision that I had down the line of like 100 men, um, and just blessed to have been in a space we've created with 100 men. So we have gotten that to that point. And there's times where I got so caught up in that I would lose presence in the moment and the impact that I had on the one man that was sitting in front of me, on the 5 men that were sitting around me, on the man that was making an impact on me, and maybe creating an opportunity for me to evolve and grow. So impact has been a big piece for me because I realized like we all want to make an impact in some way. You can replace that with purpose, right? And
Mhm.
not purpose in the sense of my work, but purpose in the sense of the essence and my truth and my authentic expression delivered through my work,
Right.
right? We all want to do that. And for me, one of the things that I have struggled with the most and continue to reach a threshold around, hence why I try my best to just like share this as I navigate through it, is making a deeper and greater impact, a bigger impact without compromising intention and integrity. That's that walking that line is not easy.
Right.
It's one that requires us to sometimes sacrifice quantity for the sake of quality. It requires us to say no to 4 yeses, to four no to 4 things in order to say yes to that one right one. It requires us to sacrifice it looking like it looks like for someone else so that it can look like the greatest version that it would for ourselves.
Mhm.
And that's those are things that someone asked me the other day, integrity, like, what's your relationship with that? Because you speak about it so much. And I told them, I'm always out of integrity. And not in the sense that that's my excuse for why I dropped the ball, but in the sense that if I'm a man with a vision and a desire to bring a gift into the world and make an impact around it, there's always going to be a gap between who I am today and who I'm becoming. So I'm always out of integrity in the sense that I'm committed to finding my edge and committed to finding where I'm out of integrity so I can move towards that. And I have men around me and support system around me that calls me on my bullshit because I do have a lot of fucking blind spots.
Yeah.
So once I share that, it allows me some space to realize like integrity is not this thing you master. Intention is not this thing we master. It's this thing we practice. And
Mhm.
I'm just in the practice of making an impact, keeping, staying grounded in integrity with my vision, with my intention, and remembering my why, which is really the intention.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up on IG, for example. Hence why I created that challenge. Like how often I, just think about, fuck, why is this not working for me? I got to try it again. I got to try it
Mhm.
again. And then I realized, I look back like, shit, this wasn't even in alignment with me.
Yeah.
Like that's not what I wanted to do.
Mhm.
And I lost complete sight of like doing it in this new way that felt good for me. So
Yeah.
I created that challenge to just support other men around that journey. And I learned so much through the challenge. That's the beauty. Like there's, 40 men over 5 days, and guys had breakthroughs and had challenges and edges that showed up, and some of them that were mirrors for me. Like, oh shit, yeah, I can answer this question, and I saw myself do this last week.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. And to your point, I think it is easy to lose sight of the goal because we're trying to focus on what that vision needs to look like in the future. And I've had similar experiences, whether it's even in corporate jobs where I want this leadership position, but then it's bringing it back and recognizing that again, leadership can be how I want to define it. It doesn't have to be a title someone else gives me, but it can be how I show up for, to your point, my family, my friends, my community, and that's something I've been able to do myself, even through the men's groups. Right, to your point, it's so easy to lose sight and be discouraged when you have 5 or 6 guys show up, because you
Right.
have like that 40 number in your mind, and it's bringing yourself back and being more present in the now rather than focusing on the future. and
Mm,
and and the other thing you touched on as far as our edges, because one of the things I've started to realize is if we don't know our edges or if we don't test them out, we limit ourselves. We stay within this narrow window of opportunity without realizing the greater potential that's out there.
mm,
Is
mm.
that something you encourage, and what do you see when people are able to step into their edges, including yourself?
Yeah, great question. Um, there's this quote, one of my favorite books, Way of the Superior Man. Uh, that's the title of the chapter is "Know Your Edge and Don't Fake It," right? And what I understand from that, just based on my own journey, is um, you know, so often we can live according to someone else's edge, and then shame ourselves when we can't hold the life that they're creating for ourselves. And on the other hand, so often we don't know our edge because we don't dare to explore beyond our edge of comfort. I mean, I'll speak like about something that I've been navigating through recently that I've gotten really comfortable, and I don't say this in a bragging way.
Mhm.
Just really feels good to own it. I've gotten really comfortable being in spaces with men, and supporting men around the things that I've navigated through, and also being vulnerable when I can't. Right, I've gotten
Mhm.
comfortable around that, and that has allowed me to create a living. That has allowed me to create a beautiful community. That has allowed me to create beautiful relationships. And what I realized is there's a new edge for me, right? And one
Mhm.
of those new edges was coming to Puerto Rico and bringing this work here and speaking about it in Spanish, right, for example. And that little boy in me that moved to the States from Puerto Rico when I was 5 and would come on the summers and get made fun of because I was no longer from here. That
Yeah.
little boy arose and he was like, no, if we go to Puerto Rico and start talking about this stuff, they're going to be like, get the fuck out of here. So that was my edge. And I could have easily stayed in the comfort of like, just back in Jersey or just my online community, not stretch out past my edge here in Puerto Rico. But that would do no one any, that wouldn't be of service to anybody. So finding my edge there was having conversations, saying the wrong words, saying the words wrong. It's there's been this journey of like, I'm new in this space. I've got to create trust in a different way. There's different experiences that people are having,
Mhm.
and yes, there's a part of me that's afraid that I'm not going to be understood or accepted. Similar to how I felt when I first started my men's groups and was looking for a way to explain to men why it mattered and why it was such a powerful thing to join. So I say all that to say that if I didn't move towards that edge, even though what other people see from the outside as like, bro, you're already doing some incredible things. You got people in your community. You've built MRM. It's easy to, lower my standard. Right, our edge is also our standard, and it continues to evolve. Lower my standard, not because there's a it's a lesser standard, but I've reached a certain place where my edge is no longer connecting with men and creating a circle and diving in. My edge is bringing this work to Puerto Rico, and if I
Mhm.
didn't explore that, I wouldn't have learned that this work is so important here, so necessary, and so many opportunities are opening up because of it. So I believe that a man must find his edge in order to know what he's made of, in order to know who he is, and in order to leave nothing on the table. I always think of like, what does living your edge mean? Well,
Mhm.
it means no, it means being at your deathbed and knowing you gave it your all, and everything that was out of your control, you met it with an open heart.
Yeah.
Like everything that was in your control, you gave it your all. Like there was nothing left on the table. So
Yeah.
I think it's literally what makes a man
Yeah.
uh, the man that he's meant to be.
Right. Right. And you wouldn't know that unless you tested those edges and how you respond to those edges, right? So yeah, no, I agree with you. And I guess you did touch on it briefly here, but why was it so important for you to go to Puerto Rico? Like, obviously, you want to share some of the work you're doing, you see the value in it, but why go back?
Right, right. So yeah, I was born here, and I think throughout my journey, I think this happens for many. It's going back to the Lion King story, right? It's like the more work we do on ourselves, the more is revealed about who we're meant to be. And I think there's this natural pull. I'll speak for myself, but I
Yeah.
think I've seen it in many. There's this natural pull to come back home, right?
Mhm.
Almost like to come back home and either like learn more about ourselves, our ancestry, learn more about our family, learn more about um, you know how what we are in the culmination of all our experiences perhaps has some mark to leave it behind where we're from. So there was this deep calling to come back, and I wasn't necessarily clear on what that would look like, but I kept having visions that would scare me,
Mhm.
and I would have these visions of like, doing the work here, having a retreat center, and then all these messages came that like just confirmed it. But on a deeper level, I will say, um, there's some family history that has impacted me and has impacted many Puerto Ricans. Just in Puerto Rico, there's a lot of femicide, so
Mhm.
domestic violence that leads to homicide, and
Yeah.
it's a problem.
Yeah.
And I think it's a problem in many countries, and it's something that impacted my late grandfather and his wife after my father's mother. And so it's impacted me directly. My grandfather committed femicide after catching his partner, his wife at that time, cheating on him in the act, right? And that was a deep generational trauma that
Mhm.
I've had to heal and have had to and continue to heal. Have healed alone, have healed with my father, have healed in my relationship with my mother, because there was also an impact there that she had from her father, not to that extent, but to the point where, she a lot of her expression while I was growing up was a trauma response to her
Mhm.
father's behavior. So all of that, it's interesting, that has all unfolded while I've been here. Like, fuck, this is also part of the reason why I'm here, and I didn't even know this. So I'm
Mhm.
having so many conversations with men here who I think we're all capable of that if we don't have the emotional intelligence, the understanding of the danger we can we can create on our community and others. If we're not aware of the range of our anger and our emotions, and I've spoken to so many men that see that they're capable of that and don't want to be, and
Yeah.
just knowing that I'm here to create space for that, and I'm not the only one, but I know I have a part in it. So just
Mhm.
just really honoring that, and that has just solidified the reason I've came, and also just connecting back to my roots. My grandparents are an hour and a half away, an hour away. So there's the simple stuff that in the present moment just feels great to be that close to my grandparents, to be close to nature. And then there's the deeper stuff that I think you know, the universe has this way of bringing us where we need to be. So,
Yeah, yeah, no, thank you, and thank you for being vulnerable about that. So that's very impactful. The last thing I did want to touch on with you, and we talked about integrity, and as men that are doing work, we still tend to get sidetracked by our ego. And then for me personally, at times there's shame around having those moments where you're letting your ego run the show. Because it's like, well, I'm doing all this work. Why is my ego still getting involved? And I've come to terms with it, and convinced myself that's part of the journey. That's always going to be the yin and yang, the balance with the ego. What are some of your experiences, and how do you manage those moments when you fall out of integrity, like you mentioned
Yeah.
before?
Beautiful, beautiful subject, and I'm really glad you brought this up because a big element to modern Renaissance man is style and self-expression. And when we look at style and self-expression, I think at the core, it's our truth. It's like purpose, right? We're just
Mhm.
we're finding a canvas. Sometimes it could be a painting, sometimes it could be our clothing, or sometimes it could be the words that we use and the cultural references, right? Those are all expressions of our truth, and they take a almost like an identity. I
Mhm.
think for some time, same. There's moments where like, fuck, I'm doing all this work. Why am I still attached to this thing, or why is my ego still showing up? And I don't think it ever goes away, and I don't think we want it to. It's integrating it allows us to express ourselves in a unique way. If I was born 500 years ago, I wouldn't be on social media. I probably wouldn't be a coach, but one thing's for sure: my truest expression, my essence, my truth, would express itself in a way that I think would be focused on supporting others, on being of
Mhm.
service in some way, as long as I did the work to peel the layers back of the ego and understand what's at the core. And then
Right.
I could take those pieces and say, well, I'm you know, uh, I don't know, a chef or a who knows what it is, right? Those
Yeah.
are all expressions of the ego. And MRM, we always like to say, like, bring your unique self expression. Like, we will question it. And by question, I mean, like, we will ask you questions that allow you to understand, that allow you to see what's truest for you and what resonates the most and what you're hanging on to because you feel like you have to versus what you're carrying with you because it aligns, right?
Right.
Hanging on to versus carrying with you. I think that's literally like the differentiator there around like the ego dominating our lives versus
Mhm.
the ego coming along for the ride and allowing us to express our truest selves in a way that's unique and exciting. Think of music, right? Like
Yeah.
yesterday, I was watching an interview with Rick Rubin, and Rick Rubin's is like master producer, not in the traditional sense, but he just sits in a room and he's like, you know what? Pull out this chord. Uh, Make this section a cappella, or what if you add a solo here? And when I was hearing him describe like creativity, it
Mhm.
was just so interesting, and listening to songs that he's created, like all of them, he helps people fully express their truth. The way he described, he didn't use the word ego, but he did say like he wants their most authentic expression to show up in their work, and he's there to remove all the layers of bullshit that's getting
Mhm.
in the way. And sometimes that means telling their friends they can't come to the studio because some artists tend to create music for their friends when they're in the studio, right?
Right.
Or sometimes it means having them in the studio because some artists express themselves better when they have people around them. But what I saw there was an element of like connecting to their most authentic expression. But sometimes he works with with rappers or with rock stars, and in the songs they're sharing their parts of their identity as well. And that identity is, the ego. It's the part
Mhm.
of them that they know, talking about the streets, talking about this, talking about that, but they're doing so with their most authentic selves. So I think that's like really ultimately what we all want is we're human beings living this experience. If the ego wasn't meant to be there, it wouldn't be there, right?
Right.
It's
Yeah.
more about integrating it so that we can express ourselves in a unique way while sharing our deepest truth, which is really the deepest truth that we all have. We all want to be loved. We all want to be admired. We all want to be of service. We all want to make an impact. Um, so I found that really interesting, and I found it easier to navigate and face off with my ego when I look at it not as an enemy. Although some books that have very powerful information will make you believe that, but look at it as something that a passenger, I will say.
Right. Yeah, yeah. And while you were sharing that, I think another thing that came up for me with the ego is often once you get to a point where you're aware of it, it gives you more information, because often when it does get in the way, there's something that we haven't dealt with. And that's where the ego can provide us with information that, hey, there's a situation here that you probably need to heal or deal with because your ego's taking over.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Well, Jose, I've really enjoyed this. Thank you so much again for coming on here and taking the time to have this conversation with me. As usual, I allow the guests to share how people, if they want to get in touch with you, how they can find you, whether it's social media or online.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, it was an honor. I'm really grateful to have dropped in and had this chat. Really beautiful questions and reflections. And if anybody's interested in my work or just more of this conversation, wants to join the conversation, Instagram is usually the best place to find my stuff. My website's currently being redesigned and launching in a couple weeks. So any other info will be linked on there on Instagram, and that's R Jose underscore Alejandro. And I try to share as much about my journey and what I'm doing on there. Also, you can check out a little bit about Modern Renaissance Man if you're looking for a brotherhood that brings together coaching, training, self mastery, resources, and just community. And you can check that out at themrmofficial.com. Most of the most of the things that we spoke about today, you'll find in one of those two places.
Yeah, and then do you mind sharing a little bit about the retreat you're doing in the Amazon?
Yes. I work a lot with indigenous cultures and just different spaces. They've allowed me to really come back to my true nature and understand, who I am at the core. Rites of passages are one of those things as well. And the Amazon. I was there in April with the Zapata community, and the Zapata are one of the main four indigenous groups in Ecuador.
Hmm.
Um, and we just saw this beautiful opportunity to bring elements of my work with men uh, with the elements of just nature immersion and cultural just experience, and bridge all those together to connect men with their true nature in Mother Nature. I think oftentimes society makes us believe that if we connect to our inner nature, aka our masculinity, our wild, our power, our fullest expression, that we are a danger. But coming back to rites of passage conversation, the truth is that not knowing our true nature, not integrating our true nature, and not knowing our edge is actually the cause of most of the ailments in our lives, the ailments in community, the danger we create in the planet. So this trip in February is all about just bringing men back to their nature in nature. And a lot of the guys that have been signing up, city boys that want to connect to nature and bring back these ancestral ways of living. And that doesn't mean come back as hunter gatherers. Really, the core of this retreat is to help men strip away the modern conditioning that
Hmm.
we've thought is the only way to live, and connect back to the truth of who they are.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that as well. Thank you. Yeah, I'm sure we'll be chatting more in the future, but yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you, brother. It was a pleasure, and really honoring you for the work that you do, for just how you show up and make an impact on not just men, but just other individuals. I've definitely been excited to see what's on the horizon for you. So grateful, and maybe we could do this again in the future. Hope you have a beautiful rest of the week.
Thanks, you as well, and I appreciate that very much. Thank you for tuning in to another episode. As always, please subscribe to the podcast if you enjoy the episodes, or leave a comment in the comment section. I always love hearing from you. Thank you again, and until next week.